This episode had a lot of interesting things that could have repercussions in the future. Let's talk a little about that. So guys, how are you? I hope you are well. I am the Monio, the interdimensional demon, who talks the most about what if on YouTube, and you are on my channel. Firstly, let's mention a very interesting detail that few people are talking about, which is the beginning of the episode with the classic Marvel Studios opening, but only with scenes from the What If episodes. And in this opening, we can notice interesting things like the Red Guardian, which appears. However, we didn't have an episode with it, which leads us to think that the second season would probably originally have 10 episodes, but it was cut. This also happened in the first season, which was supposed to have 10 episodes, but the Tony Stark episode on Sakaar wasn't ready in time, and they had to leave the episode for the second season. So there was probably an episode with Red Guardian, but it wasn't ready in time, and it was cut. After this episode, Marvel released a video of an unreleased scene, in which we have the Winter Soldier and the Red Guardian. This video was released as a preview of the third season, but it is clearly an excerpt from the episode that was cut. So it's practically confirmed that we will have this episode in the third season. Now talking about the episode itself, I thought it was sensational. The decision to place Captain Carter as the protagonist of the season was very wise, as she is a character that we have been following since the first season, with her origin episode, the fight with the Guardians of the Multiverse, and also the two great episodes we had with her, which made us create even more emotional connections and root for her even more. Likewise, the fact that Doctor Strange Supreme is the season's final villain is also great, as we also already know the character's background. We saw his origin episode, and we saw him fighting to save the multiverse alongside Peggy, and we already have connections with him, and this gives emotional weight to what happens in the episode. The fights that happen in this episode are simply fantastic, very well done, and well directed, but the fights only have emotional weight, because they are two characters we already know who are fighting, two characters who are friends, and who didn't want to be facing each other, as they once fought side by side. And their conflict becomes even more interesting when we realize that they have parallels in their motivations, as they both lost a loved one and are trying to recover, but one is trying to sacrifice people for that, and the other is not. Strange even says that he thought Peggy would understand what he was trying to do, but Peggy doesn't agree, and that's why they fight, and the fact that the two characters are two sides of the same coin is what makes this battle so interesting. I also like the decision to put Kahori in the final battle, as she was an excellent addition, not only to the series but to Marvel as a whole, an interesting, charismatic and powerful character. I confess that I missed Hela. I thought her episode was excellent. It could have been the three of them fighting together, Peggy, Kahori and Hela, but I understand that the reason is that Hela probably won't come back, unlike Peggy and Kahori, which are probably in Marvel's next plans, but I'll get to that in a moment. Some people didn't like the idea of Doctor Strange Supreme being the villain so much, but I think it made perfect sense, since from his origin episode, it was made clear that he was messing with forces that couldn't be controlled. In the episode of fighting with the Guardians of the Multiverse, he already showed signs that he was unable to fully control this power. Another thing that the episode makes clear and that we cannot forget, is that no matter how much the motivation was Steven's, he was being influenced by the dark entities that he absolved, and at a certain moment, these entities completely take control of the body from Steven, and he turns into that monster. But the most interesting thing about Steven is that at the end of his episode in the first season, when his universe is being destroyed, he asks the Watcher to punish him, and spare the universe, but unfortunately this was not possible. But at the end of this episode, when he sacrifices himself so that his universe is created, we can see that he got a second chance to sacrifice himself for his universe, and he does exactly that. So we can say that the cycle is closed, and his character arc has been concluded. Of course it's a shame that we lost one of the most iconic characters from the What If series, but that just shows the series' brave and mature script. One thing I didn't like was the justification for Doctor Strange Supreme calling Captain Carter to capture Kahori. It doesn't make sense, and this is questioned by Peggy herself, who asks why he needs her, and he responds that he needed to surprise the enemy to capture her, and in practice he uses Peggy as bait to attract Kahori and capture her. Honestly, I thought this justification was terrible, and I consider it a plot hole, since Doctor Strange Supreme was in perfect condition to capture Kahori alone. There is no justification for him to call a person like Peggy, who would be against him. Another thing that I think could have been better worked on is the power leveling of the characters. The scene in which Kahori removes the Killmonger's infinity armor is an example that very powerful characters don't need to waste time fighting in an inefficient way. They could end the fight in seconds, and in certain scenes, I had this impression with Doctor Strange Supreme, that his power has almost infinite possibilities, and yet he keeps getting hit by Captain Carter's shield. Of course you can interpret that Stephen was holding back, since we know that, despite everything, Peggy is his friend, and he had no intention of killing her, perhaps only at the end, when the entities take over her conscience, but for most of the fight, he didn't really want to hurt Peggy. What do you think? Another thing that I found a little incoherent was that the characters that were freed started fighting among themselves, and not against Doctor Strange Supreme, who was the one who captured them, and also in the scene where they were falling into the forge, and they are levitated by Kahori, and then fall again. The problem is that most of those characters were very powerful, and most of them can fly, float, or do something equivalent, so why did they just run out of action and fall? You could even interpret that at that moment, they were under the power of Doctor Strange Supreme, and so they couldn't fly, try to escape, or do anything else. This makes sense if you watch the scene where they throw the weapons. But if that was the case, I think the episode failed to indicate that this was what was happening, perhaps placing an aura of power around the characters, or something like that, because the way it was shown, it just seemed incoherent. But honestly, for me, these things are just details and don't ruin the episode, as it really was an epic season finale episode, with a lot of character fanservice and a lot of hidden references. And after I finished watching, I was thinking about how the What If series is managing to create a narrative line that is more interesting than the MCU currently. Imagine everything you saw in this episode, only in a live-action film. Have you ever thought about how incredible it would be? But the impression we had, in Phase 4, and now in Phase 5 of Marvel, is that they are not following a very concise narrative line. However, I believe that the What If series should connect with the main universe soon, and there are some reasons for this. Captain Carter is receiving a lot of attention in What If. We can say that she is currently the protagonist of the series, and for me the reason is very simple. She will be used in the MCU. Think about it with me. She is the perfect character to be introduced in any film that deals with the multiverse, since in the series, she literally goes from universe to universe, and I believe she will eventually appear in the MCU. But the Monio, you're not sure. This is pure speculation on your part. Yes, it's speculation, but it's not unfounded, like the superior Iron Man theory, made by Tom Cruise for example, as the character has already appeared in a film, being played by the same actress who played Peggy Carter in the films of Captain America. In addition, the multiverse theme is increasingly present in the MCU, as one of the next Avengers films will deal with the theme of incursions, which is basically the clash of universes. And this is what will probably enable the entry of the X-Men in the MCU, and with so many changes related to multiverses, it would be the perfect time to add Captain Carter to the film universe. Furthermore, at the end of this last episode, we get a glimpse of the timelines that were shown at the end of the Loki series, and which are represented by this tree, which many theorize to be Yggdrasil, and the same tree is shown at the end of What If, showing that the series does intend to connect with the films, since the series has this connection. But what do you think? Will we have a Captain Carter movie? Leave it in the comments, and if you like the video, subscribe to follow the next content. Until next time my people, demonic hugs.